Happy New Year. Welcome to the couch. Welcome to Carlie's Couch. Thanks for sticking with us, listening. We have a great episode for you today. Carlie, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I'm excited about the episodes. New year, lots of cool stuff going on. Hey, y'all.
What's new going on this year?
I mean, new energy, there's like an eclipse, like a solar and lunar eclipse or something happening this week. Lots of new clients and programs at the gym, launching a yoga program, lots of new projects, just lots of new stuff. I'm excited. How are you feeling?
Good. Good, same. And, at the end of the year, I thought about how, even though you can kind of be cynical about, oh man, new year, and why is everybody so excited? It's just another day, which it is, but there's still like this energy that you can't really deny, I think. And so I thought about how I can, be intentional about still trying to keep that energy, every day or think about that as you start the day, because there is a lot of new stuff that I'm working on as well, and a lot of things I've just been progressing on. So, to me, it is just like a continuation from the things that we've been talking about and working on. And so we're excited to get into that now. And so this first episode that we're going to do this week is going to be more of like a mindset episode. And so we're going to talk about being your own worst enemy and why that's even a thing, and some of the things that you can check against to see if you're being your own worst enemy, and how you can change from turning to that to being your own best friend, because it actually is going to be way better for you.
Did anything inspire this episode or this topic, or?
No, I just thought about I said no, and then I was saying why yes. So yes, I guess in that I was just thinking about some of the things that I've been able to catch myself doing a lot more of lately, and how it's like, oh man, actually I'm like progressing in a lot of things, and thinking about how some of those things really are just undermining yourself, like when it comes to procrastination or distractions or whatever, things that you may be working on. It's kind of undermining yourself if you're also sitting there saying like all these things you want to do and work on and move forward with. And so I kind of went from that to thinking about a bunch of ways that we tend to do that, or things that a lot of people do that kind of undermine yourself. And it made me think about the phrase being your own worst enemy. So I found a good article that listed some things that I was able to look at and super identify with, whether I'd been working on them or it's something that I still have to work on. And so now with that, we can throw in our own stories, our own ideas about it, and hopefully connect with you guys about some places where you've been your own worst enemy as well. So we can stop undermining ourselves and get to doing the things we need to do.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. I think, as we transition into new seasons and into new roles, I think it's much more apparent, like letting go of those like bad habits or things that you said, like we kind of undermine ourselves with, and realizing like, man, had this been like 6 months ago, I would have been struggling with this thing. But now you can see the growth whenever those new opportunities arise.
And I think that's good too, that as I was writing these things out or preparing for the episode, that I am seeing like, oh man, I'm way better at this, or I know I have felt like this before, but I don't really now. And so I think that's really good too, to be able to see like how you've progressed and, recognizing where you are in the story right now. But at first I wanted to start out by just saying, when you hear that term, being your own worst enemy, what does that make you think about?
It makes me think about like, people always say like, you're your own worst critic. For example, like if I'm having a bad day and I forget to send an email, I'm like, oh man, I'm the worst person ever today. I'm so stupid. How could I do this? And you kind of berate yourself and beat yourself up. But if you did it, if we were talking and you were like, dang, Carlie, like I forgot to send this important email. I'm like, give yourself some space and some grace. Like it's okay. You have bad days. And just thinking about that. So when, one way I think we are our own worst enemy is like being our own biggest critic and not allowing ourselves the space and the grace that we do everybody else in our lives.
I mean, I think it is that because what I would say is it's being harder on yourself. And that's exactly what you're saying, essentially, that, people don't care about stuff as much as we care about our own stuff, or judge, maybe I should say, judging our own self, criticizing, like you said, our own selves. And that to you, things will always be like, oh, I could have been better. as opposed to what other people see most of the time. I mean, sometimes maybe, but
oh yeah, like oh my God, like that speech was so amazing, and you remember like the one word that you messed up on, or when you stuttered or whatever.
Yeah, while you're doing it, planning it, after you've done it, at whatever point, but just having that mindset of like, like, you know what I mean? Like, man, I could have did this, or I should do this, or it's always more or different or better. And I feel like we talk about those types of things a lot in our episodes. And as us being achiever type people, to achieve your way through things, there's a big downside to that as well. So why do we use that phrase, you think? Or do you think it's beneficial to use that say, like when we're being our own worst critic, or we're being our own worst enemy? Why are we saying that? Like, what is that phrase doing?
Whenever I've heard it in relation to those things, like it was always like my mom, like always just saying like, oh, you're like being too hard on yourself. Like, don't, you're your own worst critic or your own worst enemy. But as I've gotten older, like it's in a lot of readings and a lot of stuff from, prominent people that are, or prominent successful people, is like, don't be the only thing standing in your way. And I think sometimes we really are the only thing standing in between us and success, or us and elevation, and us in that next level.
Isn't that so crazy? I think most of the time, like,
Dog, there's a meme and it
doesn't even make sense.
It has a horse and he has like a chain or like a rein or whatever on him, but it's tied to like a little plastic chair. And in his head, like he can't go anywhere. But I feel like sometimes like that is very indicative of how we live life. Sometimes like our limitations, our own perceptions, our own whatever, like keep us from moving forward or doing what we need to do, because we can be our worst enemy. We
should use that as the art for this if we can find it, because that also made me think about the other meme where the guy's riding the bike and he has the pipe in his hand. And then it's like he puts the pipe in his own spokes and like flips off the bike. And it's like people use it in different ways, where they'd be like, the pipe is immigrants, for example, and they'd be like, oh, put the in there and be like, oh, stupid immigrants, like just to blame something else. But like a lot of times it's yourself, and it's like, I'm doing this to myself for no reason. And so what we're going to be doing is going through and talking about what those things look like. But I think one of the reasons that we use that phrase, and sometimes we use it without thinking about it in a bad way, is because it's like you're trying to keep yourself safe and protected. And it's almost like a cover against vulnerability. And so if I'm saying like, oh man, like you're your own worst enemy, it's kind of keeping you safe to be your own worst enemy, because like nobody else can berate you more than you, or nobody else can, do those things to you.
That's interesting. It sounds like it almost kind of has two sides. Like it can have a positive side and a negative side.
Which is what I was going to go into next, is like what can be the positives of that? Because I think that we tend to see that as a positive. If I'm not mistaken, like for me, before really digging into this for today, to say, oh man, we're our own worst enemy. To me, I'm just thinking like, yeah, that's a statement, that's a fact. And to me, I see the positive in that. But I'm really seeing a lot more of the negative now.
What is the positive in it? Like when you said,
I think the positive is that by being a person who achieves their way through things, and by being a person who sees yourself as your own worst enemy, you are always seeing better, different, and maybe trying, or at least in your mind, you have the idea to be better and to want to do more, and being more of a push in that direction. So I think that's a lot of the positives of it. What about the negatives?
The negatives, I think it's such a fine line, right? Like in using it for achievement and using it to push yourself, or beating yourself up incessantly for no reason. Like I don't think you can achieve your highest and if you don't ever feel good about yourself. And in my head, like I'm taking it all the way left, but like if you're constantly like never meeting this goal of perfection that you have for yourself, then you're always going to be beating yourself up. And I think that subconsciously that can be another thing too.
And then going off of that, I think it just limits your ability to expand, because if I'm my own worst enemy, I'm in my own way. Like you're the reason why you're not growing at the same time. So it's like you have these thoughts of like doing more, being more, but you're also in this weird space where you're like preventing yourself from actually getting it. So when we're being our own worst enemy, like overall, we're saying kind of it's being hard on yourself, but then there's a lot more breakdown to it. And so now what we're going to do is there's 12 signs of signs that you're being your own worst enemy. And so we're just going to read them off first. And I want you to count to yourself and keep tally for yourself. How many you identify with. And then we'll go back through and kind of talk about them and how we can shift our mindsets from being our own worst enemy to being your own best friend. Okay.
Okay.
So this is where we're going to go through and just read them out. So the first one, you bully yourself so no one else can or before anyone else can. Kind of what we just talked about.
The second one is you trust others more than yourself.
You get anxiety because you value the comfort of others before your own comfort.
You create unrealistic demands of yourself and then wonder why you failed.
You identify with your thoughts and feelings.
You wait for someone else to save or fix your life.
You perpetuate unhealthy situations because you value other people's attention over your presence with yourself.
You refuse to accept yourself because it means you're giving up on achieving or being more.
You equate developing self-control with depriving yourself.
You wait for motivation and inspiration before you take action.
You hold yourself back from one area of your life until you fully address something else that you're neglecting.
You value the comfort of not trying over the discomfort of being vulnerable.
Okay. So those are the 12 things we're going to kind of go through, and you can see the underlying kind of themes in some of them. But I thought it was interesting because even though some of them are kind of similar, I thought of like different stories and examples of ways we do some of those things for different ones. So just to start with that first one, since we already kind of started with it, that idea that you bully yourself or you kind of berate yourself because before other people can. Also, it's like a lot of comedians are like that, where like they're used to like roasting themselves because that's how they got through, before other people roast them. But it's kind of like you can't hurt me if I hurt myself first type thing, or there's nothing you can pull on me because I already have said that or stated that. So I think it's obvious why that's bad, but like think about how you feel when other people do this. Like, do you know people where it seems like when you're around, all they ever do is like, it's kind of negative self-talk. And I think that people don't realize that they're doing that sometimes. But I have an example of somebody where anytime I say anything to them, they always like put the conversation towards something else, towards something they're struggling with, like that they're struggling with money or. What
do you mean?
So it can be like, hey, you going to go to the gym today? Yeah, I think I might try to make it, or I'll try to be there by 3. It's difficult because, the Uber is going to be this much to get there. And I know I don't really have no bread. It's like I'm basically trying to make sure I'm not homeless next month. Like, oh my gosh. And that sounds real extra and dramatic, but like every time you say something, it's like, bro, what are we doing to like get some work? Like, what are we doing to, feel better about that? What are we doing to improve or whatever, instead of it. And I always want to kind of be like, well, why are you saying this to me? Like, what do you want me to do? Because it's one of those things at first when you're around somebody and they're kind of like that, you might be like, oh, do you need something, whatever. But when you realize somebody does that all the time, it gets different. And I think there are things, so that being an extreme versus things where like fishing for compliments type things where maybe you pull up to your friend's house and you're like, oh man, I know I'm a mess today, and it's like, nobody asked you that. Or you're trying to put it out there before they say something. And it's like, they're not even seeing that. You're just bringing attention to your insecurities, really. When you do that, and it's kind of undermining how you feel about yourself and how you look at yourself and what situations you're stuck in versus not really having to be a part of that story.
Yeah, I think that's very real. And the negative self-talk, it drives me crazy. And I've talked to like a lot of people I'm close to. Like my mom and I actually have this conversation a lot. And she's like, well, that's just how things are. They're negative right now. And I'm like, that is not untrue. That is very true, but it's the light you're putting it in. So if you're always speaking about yourself and it's always terrible, oh my God, this is never going to change. Every time this always happens to me. You're speaking in superlatives.
When you're the one like introducing that, right? Yeah. Like it's different if I'm like, how's your life? And you talk about your life, like cool, but if you're always just like throwing that out there,
throwing it out there. How are you doing today? Well, even if it's like, how are you doing today? Well, every day is a struggle.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh God. But it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But also I think bullying yourself can be an internal thing too. Like if you like beat yourself up constantly about things, it's like you're ready to be someone's punching bag, and maybe this is a learned habit from trauma or from something that used to happen or from having like being in a toxic relationship, but you're always like preparing yourself for the worst. I think that can be really hard and really tough for people, but it is a way to self-sabotage, because if you're always expecting the worst, like not blaming people, but generally we tend to attract that type of energy.
Yeah, I agree. Because when that person's energy is like that, like I honestly like don't really want to talk to them. It kind of becomes a joke where it's like, no matter what I say, how is it turning into this? Like, and it's also like, bro, like you're never asking for help or talking about anything to move forward. So like, people just want to distance themselves from that. Like that's draining energy, I think. The mindset shift around that berating yourself, bullying yourself is to get more comfortable with that relationship with yourself. Like if I'm constantly in the mirror, like paying attention, if I'm always like, ugh, like I hate my edges are so rough, or like whatever it is, like, or oh, my sentences suck as you're writing or whatever, like being aware of like, how do you feel about that? And then like just changing, being okay with it. Like you're working on it. So catching that, changing your language and just being aware of like your comfort with it. And to catch yourself doing that.
Yeah, and exploring it, writing it down, and maybe figuring out why you think that your writing sucks so bad, or why that's something that you always have to attack, if it's that specific thing or whatever it is. Just working on changing that narrative very consciously.
The next one is trusting other people over yourself. And that partly goes with the next one as well, about getting anxiety because you value the comfort of other people before your own. And both of those, I think, kind of stem from like people pleasing. They stem from not trusting yourself, and they stem from kind of placing other people more important than yourself. So what that can look like is if you have an idea, or let's say if a group of people are trying to decide to do something, if a couple of them say, well, let's do pizza, and you're like, all right, and you just go with everything all the time, that's definitely, I think, a way that you're being your own worst enemy, because you're not even putting like your ideas out there. Or if that doesn't really align with how you feel or what you want to do, like you need to be able to speak up. Otherwise, it's like you're not even living your life.
Yeah, like looking for that external validation is also in my head when we were talking about it. It's like, you have an idea and it might be a really cool idea, but it's not cool or it's not real or acceptable to me until I get that approval from someone else. Like I call Lex and I'm like, oh my God, I have a great idea. And until she's like, yeah, or what if she's like, nah, that sucks. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sucks. Instead of just trusting my own, intuition and thoughts. And I think a lot of that comes from, your self-worth and how you view you. And I think that's pretty much where everything starts. Because when I first started my self-love journey, like I realized that this is something that I would do, is like looking for some type of external confirmation or validation to make me feel like things are okay, when it really is just inside of me.
Which, and then it doesn't even have to be that deep. It's just when like this is going against kind of what you really want to do or really think, like, speaking up for that. So the mind shift there is trusting yourself enough. And I think you have to know yourself to trust yourself and to trust your instincts. But if you're going to other people for their opinion or to run something against them, yes, you listen to what they say, but then you still run that against how you really feel and what you know as well. Like you're not just going to let stuff fly just to let it fly. And then with the putting other people's comfort above your own, what are your thoughts about that one?
A lot of people pleasing, a lot of giving, and codependency also is kind of like what in my head this comes to. And this is a bullet. This is being your own worst enemy, because you're always looking out for everybody else. And I say it often, like you can't pour from an empty cup, but if you're constantly just trying to make sure everybody else is okay, you're not giving anything to yourself. You're not even really checking in with yourself and figuring out like how you can comfort yourself and what you need. And there's just no way you can ever win doing that.
Yeah, you shouldn't have anxiety doing things with/for other people. And like, so the anxiety part is the part that's like, this is why it's a problem. And so to be your own best friend is you're doing what you can handle, and you're doing for other people what you can do while maintaining what you need to maintain so that you're in a good space, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so creating unrealistic demands of yourself and then wondering why you failed. This is something I've definitely struggled with and am now my own best friend on, because I'm very conscious of it. And what I mean, like when I say that is, like, it's a very subconscious way to set yourself up for failure. So if you're struggling with feeling like you're good enough or feeling like you're accomplished enough or all these things, like you expect yourself to perform at such a high level all the time. Like, I have to be the happy friend. I have to be the person everybody can rely on. I have to get straight A's. I have to be the best at my job. Like, all of these have tos. Like, at some point you're going to drop a plate because we're inevitably human. And then that's when you start to beat yourself up and do other things. But if you have a more realistic view of like what you can do and you're more understanding whenever you might have an off day, then it doesn't get so terrible for you, I guess, in this process.
And I think it feels good to feel like you're going to have it all together. And I think it feels good to feel like you're going to do all these things. And I think this is something that I've actively been working on, because I do pay more attention now to how I plan my days, like noticing like what do I actually get done, and let me plan according to that, not trying to act like, well, tomorrow I'll do 500 things. Like, it doesn't really work like that. And so a lot of this is around kind of being easier on yourself and how you're extending or expending your energy also, and acknowledging the fact that you get more things done if you have like 2-3 things to get done. Like, you get them done instead of a bunch of unfinished projects. I think that's a sign that you struggle with this, that you're being your own worst enemy, is like you're just starting stuff and you're doing a lot of things, but you just don't feel satisfied with the outcome because you need to focus in and get those few things done. Another big one, and this is one that I could look at and say, oh man, I definitely did that, and I definitely I almost feel like I'm 100% don't do this anymore, or not as much. But identifying with your thoughts and feelings. And I think it needs more explanation for what that really means. For me, I think when I read The Untethered Soul, I think it kind of, some of this kind of clicked for me that, you know, when you're being still or not, like, you're always having conversation in your mind, and you can always see like you're thinking these certain things or feeling certain things as you look around at other people. And it may feel like that's you. I'm trying to figure out how to say this stuff without it sounding crazy.
You got it.
It feels like that's you. And an example for me may be, there are certain times of the month, I'll just be way more like insecure, like overall about stuff, right? Like, things hit you differently, whatever. So if I can recognize now, like, I know, like, all right, I'm kind of feeling a certain way, or my hormones are a little off right now. And so I'm sitting here being obsessive or having obsessive thoughts about a person or about a thing, and, you know, maybe beating myself up or whatever it may be. I can very much now be able to step out of that to say, like, those exact things, like, Lex, you're going through hormones right now. You know, you just talked to this person 2 hours ago. You have work to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can look at it and be like, that's not me. That's just what I'm experiencing right now, going through, and then I'll be fine, right? And so I think I've worked on that mostly so that I don't react, and that I'd been working on like trying to take more pauses before I do things or reach out to people or say or do something that doesn't need to be said or done. And for me, that's where a lot of times I will go to my iPhone and just make my own notes or talk my way through stuff. And we've talked about that before. But you don't have to identify with that. Like, it doesn't have to be, I am sad. It's, man, like, you're experiencing like feeling kind of down right now because of whatever, or like, you don't have to stay in that space, and you don't have to say that's who you are, because it isn't necessarily. Like, you can watch that and watch how it goes up and down, and give yourself the credit to see how multifaceted you are, and you're not really like in that box.
Can you get out of my head? Like, for all of that, I think that my period app has helped me realize a lot with my hormones, because I was actually I went through that whole thing. Everything you just described yesterday, I went
every
through.
time. And it helps you feel different. Like,
and it helps me like understand. And it's like she said, imagining, like, I'm trying to illustrate like what she said earlier. So you're here, and here's sadness. You are not sadness.
Yeah.
Sadness is just here. It's like a little cloud passing through, and it happens, and you respect it and you give it space. You're not like, I'm not sad. No, you have sadness, but it's not like becoming your identity. You're not a sad person. You're not this terrible, crazy, obsessive person. You're not whatever. It's just those things. And this is a huge one for me too.
Yeah, those are transitory things. So like feelings, your thoughts, even like emotions. It's like, if you let yourself see it, feel it, kind of understand it, it doesn't have to be there, and it kind of goes away. And this is with good or bad. Like, I don't think we should get too caught up on awesome feelings or too caught up on low feelings. And so it's a good way to be able to maintain like a kind of zen, like, through things, I think. So you'll be your own best friend if you're able to look at those thoughts and feelings from the outside, and understanding, like, you know, that's not you and something that you're moving through.
I love that. Another way that we can be our own worst enemies is waiting on other people or someone in particular to come save you or to fix your life. Yeah, I think that's a big one. Not necessarily one that I've struggled with, like personally, that I like try to work through, but I've seen it a lot, and I think we can get caught in that trap of like complaining, like, oh, if this were different or if this person did this thing, then it would make everything different. And that's one way that we can be our own worst enemy, is by giving that power away to fix something to someone else, or just saying, if they only did this, everything else would be okay. But it's never up to anyone else or to anything else to fix your situation but you.
And this kind of goes back to like the guy in my first example where, that's somebody where it's like, how many times are you going to complain about something, or how many times are you letting yourself be down around a thing that we're never thinking about a way to get through? And so like, just catch yourself if you can't find that you're always complaining or that you're always talking about the issues. Like, at what point are you talking about solutions, or what are we doing to move through it? So giving yourself more power in that, because it's really easy to say like, oh man, when somebody gets me a job or when something happens or whatever, but you're not giving yourself any responsibility in that.
And so to be your own best friend, take power and take action.
The next one is another big one for me that I can see in the past. You perpetuate unhealthy situations because you value other people's attention over presence with yourself. Sometimes we're uncomfortable by ourselves, and a lot of times we'll feel unseen. When you feel unseen, is the first thing you do reach out to your phone to like hit up people you ain't really talk to, but will talk to you, or who will hang out with you, or who will engage you and make you feel good because they're going to flirt with you, or whatever it is, right? Situations that may not even be good for you. That's like the whole texting your ex thing and like all that stuff that went on over the holidays and the jokes and whatever. Like, it's kind of like that. Like, you're perpetuating that because you can't just sit there and be like, man, I feel lonely right now, or I feel unseen right now. That's the time for you to see yourself. And like, that's the time for you to work through why you're feeling that discomfort yourself. And I've been able to do that lately, to where instead of like reaching to like call somebody else up or hit somebody else up just to, just because you're bored, right? Like, that's like the hitting people up when you're being bored type thing. And there's other ways that the situation can play out. But in that example, it's like, just instead of doing that, like doing something with yourself, spending time with yourself, giving yourself that attention, and trying to think about like, why do I feel so uncomfortable right now, to where I felt like I need that from somebody else. Or before you're about to take a selfie for like no reason, which is fine. Like, I'm not judging that, but it's like, why? You know what I mean? Like, what do I need to get right now? And understand you can give that to yourself.
No, that's a huge one. And I was just about to talk about social media, so I'm glad you said it. Not that there's anything wrong with social media, but just why? Another way you can be your own worst enemy is you're refusing to accept yourself because it means you've given up on being more. That's interesting.
That one was interesting.
That's really
interesting to me too, because I never thought about it like that. That's why the first thing I wrote was, I never thought about it that way.
Well, I have not arguments. I have discussions with Jermaine, actually, and he listens to all the podcasts. So shout out to Jermaine. But like, he has a very high bar of like, what he wants to achieve. And I was telling him like, well, by being satisfied or being okay with where you are, that doesn't mean you're giving up on that thing, but it's learning to be okay with where you are and not beating yourself up for not being there yet. We still agree to disagree.
This is a really hard one for achievers over.
Yeah, I was about to say, but because I'm also a very high achiever, and so I get it. But I had to take a step back from being a perfectionist, because that was beating me up worse than learning to be okay with where I am. And I think that being like accepting yourself and where you are doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving up on being more. I think it gives you some space to learn to accept yourself where you are, and accept that, you are human and you are learning and you are growing, while still aiming for high achieving things.
Accepting yourself lets you be real with yourself. So that's really the only way you can get more of what you want, by accepting where you are, right? Like, I can sit here and beat myself up every day because, oh man, I don't wake up at 5 a.m. and I feel like that's what I should be doing and I want to get more done. Or I can accept that, man, like, if I can sleep, get what I want to get, the rest that I want to get. And when I wake up, it's like, well, I have actually this much time to do things. Or you can make it work with what makes sense for you, instead of creating like this other mold that's not even like you at all. So accepting yourself is just understanding like what your, I don't want to say like your faults or like the bad things necessarily, but like just understanding where you are. And then it helps you to maneuver a little bit better actually to like get to those things. So I think it's good to have goals. And I think honestly now it's better to have intentions, and your intentions can be being okay with where you are, being okay with yourself right now, because if you're happy right now, those things kind of come to you better.
Yeah, and as an achiever, I think that the thing that you said that really stood out to me was it's not just like accepting, like meaning you're being complacent, but it's like figuring out what that mold looks like for you, not because society and the BMI said that I have to weigh, you know, this X weight because I'm this height, knowing that that stuff wasn't built for people of color. But, you know, being like thinking of what that goal is for me and going for that instead. Like I think that might be the difference, you know, for really high achievers. And I think we get caught up in this loop of it never being good enough.
And if you're never being good enough, you're not loving your life at all. It's always something else you have to get to, and so you're not there right now. So I think part of that is kind of being able to be more happy in the present as well.
Another way that we can be our own worst enemy is equate having self-control with depriving yourself.
It's kind of similar a little bit too. So like I've felt, I don't know, I've always been kind of in the middle of this too, to where it's like self-control is cool, but also like I have the friends who all they do is work, and they want to do that, and then they know like at a certain level, like then they're going to take vacation time and they're going to do all these things. And I'm like, yeah, but you could just do that now too. Like you can still enjoy yourself and be working, but there is a good mix, right? And so for me, it's like, oh man, I don't want to deprive myself of having fun and enjoying my life. But at the end of the day, like if you really love yourself, you are seeing the long term, and like you have those long term vision of what you want to be, where you want to be. And a lot of this stuff just doesn't fit. So like a lot of the going out or whatever the habits you may have, like they don't fit with that. And so you can't be scared of like, oh man, I'm depriving myself. Like you're being your own worst enemy, because you're really keeping yourself in the same space instead of allowing yourself to kind of grow forward and grow past that by having some self-control in certain areas.
Oh, I like that. My mind didn't take it there at all, but I really like the way that you described that. In my head, I straight went to fitness and to like depriving yourself from foods and all these things. And I think it's great. I think discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love that you can have. But I think there's a very thin line through like of deprivation and discipline. So it's like you have these goals, but if, you know, all you're eating is rice cakes and drinking, you know, this cinnamon tea or apple cider, whatever the tea is that people drink when they lose weight or want to lose weight.
Oh, I see. So you're saying like you have to deprive yourself to have self-control?
No. I'm saying that there's a thin line. No, there's a thin line between
feeling like self-control means like you had to be kind of miserable.
Some people think that self-control and discipline mean being miserable and depriving yourself, that you're not disciplined if you're not depriving yourself. And I'm saying that there's a thin line. I think discipline is important in making sure that everything that you're doing is in alignment with that long-term vision, including like the food you eat and exercising and things like that. But I don't think that you should deprive yourself of experiencing those other things. Like it's okay to have a slice of pizza every once in a while. Like it's okay to skip a workout one day when you feel like you need rest. It's like listening to your body and learning to understand that. As I said, I took it straight to fitness.
Okay.
Another one is, this is a big one. I think especially with society at this moment, is you're waiting to take action like until you're inspired or feel motivated from something. I feel like a lot of people go to like empowerment lunches and watch like Tony Robbins or Eric Thomas videos, you know, to feel real hype and get high off this emotion. And then they're like, okay, now I can take action. Now I can make these changes. But then it's like a cycle and it's repeat. Like you need this stimulus to make you want to do something. And I would say a lot of the time people who get stuck in this loop like aren't even taking that action. It's like just getting high off of inspiration.
And you always need to keep reading more books and listening to more stuff and find more information. So if you catch yourself feeling like you always need to figure out more and more and more or get something sparked, it's like you're never going to do anything. And this is actually really where you start a lot of stuff and you don't finish it, or you only want to do things when you feel like it. And it's like nobody really feels like it all the time. Like that's not even realistic, but there's a certain level of things you need to commit to and know like that needs to get done. And if you sit around waiting like for motivation, or if you spend your time looking for motivation, you're wasting a lot of time that could be in action. So it's kind of a loser thing to do, like, honestly, like, to wait to be inspired before you can do something. And people who are really good and really skilled with things, especially in the arts, a lot of times we think it's like, oh, you're inspired and then you write or whatever. But like a lot of these people who have like 20 Grammys and who are the writers and stuff like that, like it's actually, you learn to write, like you're writing. And that's like one thing I'm working on now. It's like not waiting till it's like, I think I have an idea, but forcing myself to really like write or do something and spend time doing it to get better at it. And just to act. One of the mindset shifts for people who tend to wait around for motivation, inspiration is the 5-second rule, which is Mel Robbins' thing, where like you just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you have to do something. Like you can't sit around in that middle ground of trying to make a decision or thinking too hard about it. You just do it. And so it's just being more about action. You're definitely going to be your own best friend if you get things done, which is like the crux of everything in every episode.
Always.
Another way that you can be your own worst enemy, and this is one that I was like, dang, this is what I'm be messing up with now, is you hold yourself back from one area of your life because in your mind you're thinking you need to fully address something else that you're neglecting. To break that down, because I had to read it a few times myself. An example of this for me is when I've talked about before, like having literally a list of people who are like, send me proposals, I want to do something with you, or just, give them the information, whatever, right? Just even start the conversation, get sales, whatever. And feeling like, oh man, I can't do that yet because I'm working on this thing, or like I'm trying to get the team together, or I'm trying to tighten up something, or I'm not ready yet for whatever reason, right? Like I'm keeping myself for money because I'm trying to do some other stuff and trying to think I need to have this all together or planned, when like this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. So I should be like, forget this and like do this and make it work. You know what I mean? Like the point of your business is to make money. And so I see a lot of ways where you feel like you have to attack one thing at a time and you're like blocking all these other things. Whereas a relationship or even just the conversations continuing with some of those folks could have, who knows where that could lead you, but it also puts more in your pocket, which is the point of all this, which then can help fund, you fixing up things or doing whatever you're doing, right? And so it's not limiting yourself and not depriving yourself of feeling like, oh man, I can't do this until this. It's anytime you find yourself saying, yeah, but around doing something, it's like, why are you limiting that?
I think that there's never a perfect time for anything. Like, I don't think anything will ever be ready, like in your head, how things have to be for you to move forward. It's, there's a quote, it's like, an okay plan executed this week is better than a perfect plan executed next week. And so it's figuring out ways.
Or a perfect plan never executed, which is mostly what happens.
Exactly.
I absolutely agree with that.
And did you want to talk about that part?
With the mindset shift of that is, recognizing that you don't have to wait. So now I'm like trying to, like when I get an email, it's like, it just seems like it's overwhelming, or it's like a lot of like, oh man, I'm gonna have to, set up some calls, meetings and stuff. Instead of thinking about all these other things that I thought I wanted to do first, just, reaching out to them or just answering it and just getting the stuff started. And addressing the flip side of that thing that you're waiting to fix. So like thinking about what you're missing out on, or by waiting to do these things, like I'm missing out on this potential opportunities or money over here, which is what I'm saying the goal of me working on this is anyway. So it's like, why are you trying to do more work that you need to do? Just being more open to not putting things on hold. If you find yourself putting things to the side, unless it's like not in your time or whatever, right? But if these are things that you're putting to the side, but they correlate with what you say your top goals are, then it doesn't really make sense. So just kind of looking at it from that different perspective.
And then the last one we have, one of the last ways you can be your own enemy, or you're valuing the comfort of not trying over the discomfort of vulnerability.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Like, and for people who listen to us, like y'all already know what time it is, and y'all know, like vulnerability is the key, man. Like it's so wild how the more you try to protect yourself, the more you're really just limiting yourself. And I don't know, you just gotta get used to being uncomfortable, and also understanding like a lot of people are uncomfortable. It's not just you, and it's not like some crazy struggle that you're just going through by yourself. You have to value moving forward, before you value like how you look or how you appear to be or how you feel comfortable in this. Like everything's cool now, but it's such an internal struggle when that doesn't match up to what you say you want to do and the other things you want to get to, and you really just have to jump out there to get to it, because then all of a sudden it feels great like once you've jumped out there, I think.
No, same. And it's being comfortable with discomfort, like constantly in all areas, but also like, what are you missing out on by staying safe and not taking that risk, whether it's in business or relationship or starting something or traveling somewhere? Like, you only think you're missing out on it because you see what you have currently, but you have no idea what that door holds. So that you're limiting yourself. It's like, why would you do that? We get one life that we know of. Like, why would you limit yourself from not experiencing those things that your heart yearns for, or that you just want to because you want to?
Yeah, you listen to yourself. And so being your own worst enemy is like you're fighting yourself. It's like every time you're thinking like, man, that'd be cool if I was a painter or did something different. And you're like, yeah, but I need to be able to pay my bills or this or that. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. But you'll start to notice, like, after listening to this episode, or even as we were talking, like, thinking about all the times that you contradict yourself. And I do this all the time. Like, my friends call me out on it all the time on a lower level where I'm always like, man, I'm hungry. I should make this. Nah, I shouldn't do that. I should go to the store and not spend money. Like, you do that thing where you have this whole conversation with yourself. And it's like, bro, like, be your own best friend. Like, hype yourself, agree with yourself, do the things that you want to do. And you would think it's not that hard, but like...
It is.
Yeah. Or maybe hard isn't the right word, but it's not... We've grown to it not being second nature anymore. Whereas maybe it was as a kid, like you do what you want to do, and then you kind of grow to like feel like you have to fit into a thing or something. So I think that's so interesting that it's like, why are we fighting ourselves so much?
I think any situation where you start having to qualify things in your head, like, yeah, but you know, sometimes, like, anytime you start qualifying, like, I challenge you to like maybe journal it or put it in your notes in your phone or just think through it. Like, well, you know, am I holding myself back? Like, is this pushing me in the direction of my goals? Like, is this moving me forward? Am I loving myself and being my own best friend when I do this? And I guarantee you'll find a lot of areas for growth in ways that you can focus your energy.
Yeah. So if you're impacted by any of those things and you learned anything or thought about something that you can apply better, want you to journal about it, write about it, hit us on social media, Carlie's Couch, Lextopia, Carlie Carpio, or CC Fierce. I was about to say Carlie Fierce. I was like, that ain't it.
Rare.
Dang, my bad.
You good?
Y'all know what they are. But hit us up so we can kind of see where you are, so we can share your thoughts and also share this episode with other people you think are like, man, like that person is always like talking down on themselves or whatever. And just share that information.
Yeah, we gotta hold each other accountable, and we all out here trying to grow and get better, and it's all out of love. So please send it to somebody. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Let us know. Then we have the question of the week. What is the most spontaneous thing you've ever done?
I can't answer forever.
Recently.
Oh, okay. Recently, I was about to say this year, but that's just started.
I don't know. We just got here.
Right. I guess the most spontaneous thing recently would be like going skiing or like going to do things like that.
Oh, you look so cute.
In the last, I guess, few weeks. It was a lot of fun, but I was about to not go. Like, I didn't really want to go at first. My family was planning to go that came in town. And I was like, man, I could do some work or I'll just chill or whatever. But I was like, no, I'm going to just go. I felt like the whole time I spent at home over the break was kind of like that, where I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do no work. And like, I just did random things. So maybe that was one of them, because I wasn't really going to do that and I wasn't really planning on it, but it was random and it was like the whole day and it was a lot of fun.
That's dope. I had one in mind, and when you said that, I thought of another. So I'll give y'all two. The first one is my tattoo. Because I've been wanting it, but then I reached out and he was like, hey, I can do it tomorrow. And I was like, okay. So
was that your first one too?
No, it's my second one. So shout out to Pancho. He's dope. But then the other one was for my birthday. I drove to Rosarito. I drove to Mexico because everybody's like, oh, what are you going to do for your birthday? And I was like, I don't know. And I was getting anxiety about it. And I was like, I shouldn't be stressed about my birthday. But then I was like, man, I haven't been to Mexico outside of a cruise. So in my head, that means I really haven't been to Mexico if they tell me like where I have to be. And so my Neo, shout out to Tayshelle, came out here for my birthday, and I was like, hey, you want to go to Mexico? She was like, yeah. So we drove the next day.
Mm-hmm. It's always fun to take like random trips. Just get up and go somewhere and just do something for the day. So that is a good one. What's the most spontaneous thing you've done recently, I guess?
Dun, 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 dun.
Let us know. Is that all we have for him today?
That's all we got.
All right. Well, that's all we got. Thanks for sticking with us on The Bouch, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, y'all.